I'm here today with Sara Elmstron and David Vincent from CXO2 to chat all things customer ahead of their roundtable at CCWinter, which is just over 1 month away. Be here very soon. Sara, David, it's great to chat to you both today.
Great to chat to you too. Thanks for inviting us in.
Thanks, Alexandra. It's great to be here.
Amazing. So I'm going to dive straight in to this. And my first question really relates to your roundtable topic, which is a really great title. It's falling in love with a problem before you start solving for it. Now, can you tell me what does it mean to fall in love with a problem, and especially in a CX context? And why is this so often overlooked?
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra. So it's a really great question. We chose that title because it's one of the central kind of tenets of what we use in our work. And falling in love with the problem is really about making sure that we're understanding not just the symptoms. So oftentimes in CX, we see lots of symptoms and they can be treated, but really understanding the root cause. And so a good example of that is we've got high call volumes, there's customers in queues, and so we're throwing more people at it or trying to automate some things to create some capacity, but maybe it's a product of the process, and maybe there's a broken process somewhere. Maybe we've sent out some customer communication that wasn't clear. And so really it's about uncovering all of that, going through the different layers and making sure we fully understand the root cause before we start solving for it. So that's the falling in love with the problem. It's a way of thinking that's often used in both design and in strategy.
And if I can add to that, one of the reasons that I see it being overlooked is sometimes there's a pressure to get a result. Sometimes there's a pressure to change a KPI, and sometimes there's parts of a business that see a specific KPI, see a specific result, and they just want that changed. Our approach is let's take a step back and let's not react, but let's respond. How can we think more broadly about what's happening in this situation, not only so that we can improve that one KPI, but also so that it doesn't happen again in the future. So examples could be in sales organizations where big marketing campaigns might happen, and that drives call volumes in, and the contact center can't answer all the calls that are being handled. So the symptom that's being treated is grade of service or number of calls answered, but the actual cause is some internal communication in the business around how do we collectively work together for the customer. So I think that overlook can sometimes happen because of a speed just to respond.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like you say, really uncovering what the actual problem is in depth, as opposed to thinking, oh, this is the issue, and going and running with that as something to solve. And that actually plays into my next question. And you did mention there, David, the symptoms. So when you think about different CX initiatives that you've seen, why is it that you think they end up treating these symptoms rather than the causes? And are there any patterns that you see emerging across specific industries around this?
Do you want to start this one?
Sure. Sure. So patterns across organizations is fascinating. And definitely there are patterns. And unfortunately, sometimes the patterns are responding to because what's happening generally. So buzzwords can get attracted to. AI is a really interesting one right now. There's a lot of desire to have AI solutions or work out how we respond to AI. And that pressure is coming, or that the requirement to do that is coming from all angles in an organization. It's not always a coordinated response. Therefore, we find that a consistent pattern is individual departments working in isolation on sometimes the same part of the problem, but not coming together to think about it. So the opportunity there is to, again, step back, look at the whole problem and try and find out what are the root causes. How might we ask ourselves the questions that help us understand what's really going on here, rather than have individual departments simply trying to solve what their experience of that problem is. So what would you add on to that?
I think it comes back to, I agree with all of that, but it also comes back to what we call our CX blueprint. And so we often talk about being customer centric, and most organizations are customer centric and would like to be, and that's absolutely the intent. If we keep in this, and I'm going to draw this in the air now, but if we keep the customer at the center, imagine that. Imagine all the customer interfaces sitting around the customer, whether that's digital or it's human or it's a bit of both. It's your voice channels, it's chat, it's text, it's email, it's everything sits around it. So consider that a bit of a shell that protects the customer or the member experience. And then around that, we've got the whole organizational system. We've got a really simple philosophy that we apply to everything that we do, the triple play, so culture, customer, and commercials. And we think about all of those aspects and how we think about solving for those problems. So the symptoms you often see in the center, but oftentimes the root cause sits elsewhere. And so that could be, is there a challenge around the tools that we're providing the people in the centre? Is there a challenge around the speed of the website? That means that people, our customers who are trying to deal with us through our website, actually drop out of that channel and come back into a voice channel, which, as we know, is an expensive way of doing things. It's an important way of doing things, but really those very special humans in the context should be working on things and dealing with customers who need human help, not because they've dropped out of their preferred channel, because that isn't optimized just yet. And then outside of that organizational system, we've got the macro environment. What are your competitors doing? What's happening in the global landscape? What's happening, within country, and where are things moving? The regulatory changes and those sorts of things. So really, it's about if we're asking the people in the center, or the people who manage those channels, lead them to deal with the issue, that sometimes that's dealing with a symptom that actually exists in that broader system.
Both really great answers there. Thank you. And so many more questions I can ask from that. Questions where to start. But I think I'm going to start if we focus in on this blueprint that you mentioned there, Sara, because that sounds really interesting. A very good description of the different levels involved within not just the contact center, but the broader business. Can you walk us through how this blueprint can help teams kind of really diagnose the real problem they're facing, and not just the ones that they may be showing up in surveys or from the complaints that they've been receiving?
Yeah, definitely. And we've got this really simple, what we call a flywheel, that describes the three kind of tenets that I talked about earlier, or lenses, if you like: culture, customer, and commercials. And it's a really oversimplified way of thinking about the problem. So we're looking at this here and saying, there might be some issues out here, and you sort of move it around. And what's the symptom that you're seeing? It could be high turnover, as an example. But what is that? Is the solution to recruit more people, or is the solution to find out why people are leaving? And is it because we're not attracting the right talent? Is it because our onboarding leaves a bit to be desired? Is it because processes are really complex, or is it because the job is really hard and we're dealing with lots of customer complaints? Really understanding what it is means we can attract the right talent and keep them. And so it's addressing that symptom that we're seeing through uncovering the problem and falling in love with it. Would you add anything to that, David?
I would. I think the flywheel that Sara has shared with you is as she said, a very simplistic version of it. What the blueprint helps us to do in its entirety is show to people that there's not a one-on-one relationship between a symptom, a cause, and the solution. Sometimes the problem, the solution for one aspect is going to solve 3 or 4 aspects of a problem. So to take that example further, in terms of, you might not be getting enough, a high enough level of quality for customer service. When we unpack that with organisations, we found a range of symptoms there that have, once they're addressed, they not only address the customer experience by improving training, by more appropriate targeting of recruitment, by more effective onboarding and setting and managing expectations. But once you fix those things, that not only fixes the customer experience, it starts reducing complaints, it starts increasing sales, it starts improving the culture within an organisation. So the culture, the commercial and the customer experience all improve. And we've drilled it down into 2 or 3 simple, not simple, but straightforward and easily managed underlying symptoms that could be addressed. So the blueprint helps people see the interconnectedness, and a holistic solution really needs to be thought through, rather than just find the quick win.
That makes so much sense, because like you say, everything's so connected. If you've got happy staff, you're going to have happy customers, is a little phrase I always end up saying.
Right.
But it's so true. The more engaged the staff are, the less likely you are to get complaints about that service. And I guess kind of building on that, and you've also mentioned, David, about kind of when companies are working in silos and perhaps both working towards solving the same issue, but not together. When we think about customer service, sometimes a business can think, oh, it's a contact center issue, it's a customer team, it's not to do with me. But obviously, actually, like you're saying, that's all interconnected. So how can you help businesses shift that mindset to make the customer service and customer delivery a whole of business priority, especially when potentially the customer teams already know that? It's the rest of the business that aren't quite bought in to that customer service.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and there's a couple of things just to think about there. The first one is, when we think about customer experience, we know that where it happens isn't where it starts. So it starts with our strategy. It starts in the boardroom and around the executive table where the decisions are being made, and it starts with culture. So that's something that we always hold on to. And the other piece is customer experience is everybody's business. And so oftentimes when we go and we work with organizations, we'll start with what we call a 360-degree health check. And we interview everybody, not everybody in the organization, but a good cross-section all the way through and across. So almost the entire operation will be involved in it, but also right the way from the CEO and through to frontline. And that gives us a really good understanding of strategic intent. And as it trickles through, how does that really play out in frontline, and what does that really look like? What's that experience like? Because the employee experience is also incredibly important in this. And so doing that means we get really good alignment and engagement with the executive team who represent different functions in the business, but also specialists and other representatives from those functions, so that we get that 360 view of what's really going on, and it sort of triggers some thinking. And then we run some workshops and some alignment sessions, and that's how we build what the roadmap might look like. It is by engaging the whole system, not just the operation. They're the ones who are feeling it, and we work really closely with them to support them, but it's important to get the whole organisation lining up behind them. Anything to add to that, David?
Yeah, I think in every organisation that we've helped, it's never been the case that people are willingly sticking in a silo and not wanting to work with each other. I have to attribute this quote to one of our clients. It wasn't something we came up with, but they observed that in their organisation that the executive team worked alongside each other, but not necessarily worked with each other. And so our opportunity through the work that we do in interviewing people at all levels, we then present that back to the wider group, so the wider group can then see, actually, there's some commonality here, or there are opportunities for us to work together to solve a problem, rather than working individually on just our silo or just our immediate directions. And I think that really is anchored in, when you put the customer in the middle of everything that you're doing, then you start looking at everything in terms of what's this impact on the customer, and that creates that centralized view and that common view of what are we actually here to do.
Thank you. And I think that's just really interesting, talking about that 360 and the trickle down and people working alongside each other, not together. It's really interesting because people probably don't think they're doing that. People think the trickle down's working just fine, and the CEO thinks the frontline team is actually really following their vision. But somewhere along the way, things do get disjointed. So really great to see how you're identifying where those bumps are in that road, and how to then fix them and get the team engaged throughout. Now, obviously, when you're doing something like this, it's quite a big process, especially if you're engaging the whole business. How do you encourage organizations to kind of take that pause, slow down, do that introspection to see where they need to make those changes, as opposed to, when they're under pressure to deliver fast, to change things? How can you encourage people that they need that breather?
I think the fact that we've spent the time with a number of different members in any organisation has immediately started us to set the relationships with our client at different levels, and we are able to start sharing insights very, very quickly, and sharing, oh, that's a common view, or another part of the business is experiencing this, how does that play out for you? And we start generating some understanding that there's a need to work together just through the very act of the interview process. We aim to complete that within a reasonably short space of time, so that we can play back findings, recommendations with some degree of prioritization and quantum of change impact. representing that back to the wider executive teams wherever we can allows them to see the scope and scale of the challenges and opportunities they have. And again, that in itself gives pause for thought and allows people to think, we do need to take this time. I guess in terms of the initial engagement and convincing and supporting people to take the first brave step to, yeah, we'll take some time to think about it. I might throw to Sara to answer that part of the question.
Well, look, I think it's about typically when we speak to people, and they can be people who have different jobs within that broader business, is they're interested and they're curious, and they may know that they've got some things to solve for, and that could be there's some challenges, but it could just as well be opportunities. And I think what we see is that there's so much pressure out there, and particularly in some industries, we're seeing that things like regulatory requirements are creating not quite a sea of sameness, but from a product perspective, it can be really hard to differentiate yourself. We're seeing, a pricing which we've all felt as consumers, and cost of living crisis has been under quite a lot of pressure. Some of that's plateauing or has been plateauing. And so we see customer experience as an opportunity to create a point of differentiation, really understanding what the value proposition is and delivering that through your service and through your experience. And so talking in that way is really around, well, if you want to grow and differentiate, then investing in the customer experience makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's very true. People will follow a business that delivers that great experience and abandon those that don't. So thank you for that. And that is actually all the questions I have time for today. I know you'll be answering a lot more and talking a lot more about this in August. But till I see you then, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Alexandra.
Thanks, Alexandra.